Good day, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar and taking time out of your busy schedule to learn more about today's topic, cool things you didn't know were possible with Citrix Networking. My name is May, and I am the producer of today's webinar. Joining me for this session, we have Mark Lubarski and Tertius Bauer. Both Mark and Tertius are from the systems engineering team here at Citrix. In today's session, you will learn about 5 cool Citrix ADC capabilities that you did not know before. But before we go into the presentation, let me quickly mention a few housekeeping details. We will have a Q&A session towards the end of today's event, and you're welcome to submit your questions during the presentation. Just look for the questions box in your GoToWebinar control panel, enter your question in there, and click send. And we will try to answer as many questions as we have time for during the Q&A session. In addition, we are recording this event, and you will receive an email tomorrow with a link to view the recording. And lastly, a survey will launch once you leave today's webinar. We would appreciate if you could fill out that survey and provide us with your feedback. And with that, I will hand it over to Mark to get us started. Mark, let's begin.
Okay, thanks, May. Just starting now. Okay, so May mentioned at the start there's 5 main things we'll be covering. And before we get into those, there's a few smaller things I wanted to cover first. One of the cool things that has happened this year is the major release of NetScaler 12.1, upgrade from 12.0. And what a lot of people don't know is there were some pretty massive performance improvements across, especially our hardware platforms, just from the software update. And so some of the impressive things here. So literally upgrading from 12.1, you would get 350% better ECDSA cipher performance on a NetScaler. And the way they've achieved that is, we use the traditional SSL hardware acceleration, but with this new hybrid mode, we're also able to leverage the Intel crypto extensions. And so we're approaching it in a hybrid mode, and especially for ECDSA ciphers, we're getting a 350% performance increase. Some of the other impressive things just from a software upgrade, 200% increase concurrent TCP connections, 250% concurrent SSL, 2,755% increase in cache objects. And so that sounds like a pretty big number because it is. And this is something related to the fact that we now have a ability to run 64-bit packet engines. So we can address much more memory space. And finally, we now have some additional NIC, physical NIC options in the chassis. So when you're purchasing a new chassis, we have 25 gig, 40 gig interfaces, 50 gig and 100 gig interfaces, which we're seeing more common in enterprise data centers. So these numbers are based off our Abacus 26250 platform, but similar sort of increases are across the hardware range. So along with those performance improvements, there's a number of cool features and use cases that have been added in 12.1. And now I'm not going to go through all of these, it's kind of a view from above. But what I will do is just quickly cover off some of the ones that I know that my Australian and New Zealand customers have been asking for quite a long time. And so the first one of those would be the triple ATM feature at the top left, support for 14-day password expiry notifications when using LDAP auth. Had a lot of customers request that. Support for DNS name servers over TCP. So this is an interesting one that was driven more by our SSL VPN and always-on VPN customers. And it's basically the ability now of NetScaler to answer TCP-based DNS queries, where before it was a UDP only. And and only really became an issue for customers who had DNS responses that were larger than UDP maximum size. And so there were a lot of command line workarounds and things that you'd have to call support for, but now it's just officially supported and it just works. So the other things of note here are SNMP version 3. There's been a lot of requests for that. So we've had that since 12.1. And moving along, security, ICAP support for NetScaler ADC. That's a big one that we've wanted for many years. And I'll just explain what that is. So if you're, I guess, load balancing Exchange or a site that takes file uploads, and you want to virus scan those files, you need to get that across from the NetScaler to the scanning engine, basically. In the past, we had some complicated workarounds to make that work, but the reality is 90% of the antivirus companies support ICAP, and so now our customers can use ICAP, which is very simple to configure to make that work. And finally, looking over to the right-hand side, a whole third of the page is taken up by MAS. There's been a huge push for MAS features, and a lot of development effort is going into MAS and will continue to go into MAS. Okay, so moving on to the 5 things we said we were going to talk about. The first in the list here is Secure Web Gateway. And before I jump in, I'll just explain what that is for people who don't know. So NetScaler ADC for a long time has had the ability to do forward proxy. So this is users who are on-prem trying to access the internet using a proxy server. We added a whole bunch of features to bring that up to sort of an enterprise-grade level proxy, and release that as a separate product and license that you can run to achieve that. So Secure Web Gateway is what we'll cover off. So a few statistics here. So NSS Labs predicts 75% of web traffic will be encrypted by 2019. 50% of cyber attacks in 2017 used malware hidden in encrypted traffic to evade detection. So a lot of attacks coming through, users connecting to sites via HTTPS. And on average, Google is blocking 10,000, blacklisting 10,000 websites per day. So NetScaler Secure Web Gateway helps with that. It's easy to use, it's high performing. We leverage our SSL hardware and hybrid capabilities. We've got a web security solution for encrypted and clear traffic, and we have some user behavior analytics, and we'll cover that off now. So in terms of how it's deployed, we're able to intercept the encrypted traffic now, so we can do the HTTPS man in the middle that you would expect from an enterprise proxy. We add to that user behavior analytics. We make that easy to use, so it can be deployed as a transparent bump in the wire, or an actual forward proxy that you hard code into your SOE settings or pack file. And then we add to that layer 7 inspection, so URL categorization and filtering, and the ICAP stuff I mentioned for ADC, we've had on Secure Web Gateway for quite a while now. So here I'm going to show an example of pretty much what the title of this presentation is, cool things you might not have known. And this is if you combine Citrix Secure Browser Service with Secure Web Gateway. And if you look at the diagram we've got here, we've got some users at the bottom inside the corporate world. We've got a Secure Web Gateway box, and there's the cloud, and there's some SaaS apps there. So the scenario is this: the user tries to go to the internet. Our Secure Web Gateway has a look at the URL and determines that it's in the list of sites that are of low reputation or high risk. It sends a redirect to the user, which sends them off to a secure browser within Citrix Cloud. So what actually happens there is we've identified that the site has a chance of being malicious, and instead of the user browsing directly to that site, we're putting them through a Citrix session. Now, the secure browser that's running is running within Citrix Cloud, within a Linux container. And so the whole point of this is that if there's any sort of malicious JavaScript or anything like that running within that browser, it's now running within the browser that's in the cloud, and the client's just getting a view of that. And so this works even if they don't have Citrix Receiver installed. It'll seamlessly run the HTML5 receiver to achieve it. Now, if the user, on the other hand, is going to an approved site, then we can simply just proxy them through as we normally would through their regular browser. So I mentioned we've got URL categorization. So just I guess a shot here, example of different categories and how you can configure and deconfigure them. We have 180 plus categories in 19 different groups, and a whole bunch of different actions we can perform based on the different categories. There's actually more than just those four that are listed there. That's probably just the most relevant ones. And so I mentioned we do a lot of user behavior analytics, and you can see this. So this is from the NMAS, and Secure Web Gateway feeds into NMAS. And you can see that now we're doing things that we didn't do in the past. Like now we're assigning risk scores to users based on the types of sites that they're visiting. And we're also able to flag, using machine learning, any anomalous behavior. So anything that does not normally happen, we're now able to highlight that in the dashboard. And so we can drill into that further. And if you look at this example here, you can see there's a filter that's been placed, which shows that the admin's filtering on social networking sites, and they're filtered on a particular user. And then they're able to get a report on exactly what time and what protocol the user was using when they were accessing these social media sites and what those sites were. The other interesting thing as well is that you can see that majority of that was HTTPS, yet we're still able to report on it. Okay, so that was, I guess, an update on Secure Web Gateway. I'm going to go across now to our WAF service. And so many of you are probably already aware that NetScaler ADC has had a very powerful web application firewall for a long time now. We have protections across the board. You know, we protect the OWASP top 10. We've got the SourceFire, Snort, signature protection, IP reputation, which is included, like you don't have to sign up for it like other vendors. And the list goes on. So essentially what we've done is we've taken that and we've made that available to be consumed as a cloud service. So to deploy that, very simple, 10 clicks once you're on Citrix Cloud. Select a site, enter your application details, and you'll notice one of the fields here is SSL cert key name. So if we're going to do WAF for your site, we're going to need the certain key so we can decrypt that traffic to protect. And then anyone who's configured web app firewall before will notice some similar fields, the types of security checks you want to do. You can customize the profile, you can turn on or off signatures, that kind of thing. And then one of the cool things that you get when you've signed up for our WAF service is it also can feed into MAS. And we've got a pretty good security dashboard here where we can give an overview of what sort of attacks are coming in, you know, top IP addresses, attack locations, trends, all that kind of stuff now becomes visible just by signing up to the WAF service. Okay, so the next cool thing we thought we would cover is pooled licensing. And so many of our customers in Australia and New Zealand have already taken up pooled capacity licensing in one form or another. And many still don't know about it. So that's why we're covering it here. So I'll just go over the different types of licensing. So we have the classic way of licensing where you dimension it based on bandwidth. The term is perpetual, so the license lasts forever. Its license host is local, which means it's stuck on the host that you've licensed it to, and the platforms MPX, SDX, and BPX. So that's the traditional licensing method. It's quite static. You know, you have to pick a throughput, pick a platform, and then that's that. As time went on, we sort of evolved, and we brought in what was called check-in, check-out licensing. And so again, this is dimension based on bandwidth. It's perpetual, only supported BPX, but now the license host is NAS, and it's no longer local to each NetScaler. And so the use cases here that we were seeing more often were automation use cases where, you know, based on load, you want to spin up more NetScalers, spin them down. And then this load may not be even across different times of day in different parts of the world, if that's how far your organization spans. And so this was really a way to check in and check out bandwidth and scale up and scale down as it was needed. You know, Azure and Amazon were probably the biggest use cases for check-in, check-out. That then evolved to become more flexible, and we brought in pooled capacity licensing. And the big shifts here is that this changes from being a perpetual license into subscription-based, and so you pay for 1 year up to 5 years. There is no longer a restriction on the platforms you can use it on. And so what this means is that you can now purchase MPX and SDX hardware that is zero capacity, so you're getting it for near manufacturing cost, and that those appliances are able to check in and check out capacity from the pool. So this is quite powerful for a lot of companies, or actually most of our customers have some sort of hybrid cloud deployment these days, and they're not exactly sure all the time how much capacity will be on-prem, how much needs to be in the cloud, and when that will change. And so a pool capacity solution here allows you to shift that capacity around to the NetScaler that you need at the time that you need it. This is another type of pool capacity that is lesser known, vCPU-based capacity. This is just for VPX and CPX, and this solves the problem where if you're going full cloud, a lot of the constraints are no longer bandwidth, but become CPU-based. So if you're doing a lot of SSL or a lot of application firewalling, you might need a lot of CPUs, but not so much bandwidth. And this can work out to be economical for a lot of customers. And what is coming very, very soon, I think we've already got SKUs for it, is the MAS service pool capacity. And this enables all of the above to work. So depending on where your NetScalers are, you install an agent on the same network that your NetScalers are. That agent then brokers communication to MAS service, where you can check in and check out licenses. And this really makes it a lot easier to manage because now you have a single pane of glass through MAS service where you can see exactly where your capacity is sort of distributed around the organization. You know, we've got a lot of customers who have lots of NetScalers here and there, and they've lost track, and they have to contact their account manager to figure out what they've bought and where it is. When you bring in this kind of pool capacity, that's no longer an issue. You've got a view of exactly what you've got. And finally, this will be the last piece before I hand over to Tertius. Just a few of the reasons and drivers behind pool capacity. I've sort of covered economics, application server autoscale, so adding and removing servers on the back end and then requiring an upturn in throughput. NetScaler autoscale, so turning on, turning off NetScalers. Multi-cloud GSLB is an interesting one that I'll just quickly cover. So the scenario here may be that you have a primary and a secondary data center in active-active, and then you may have a third data center in one of your cloud providers that's passive, and not just passive, it might actually be turned off completely. And so the way we're seeing customers use this is they may take a failure to their primary, they'll turn on the capacity at their disaster recovery cloud-based DC, and then that capacity can just be rechecked out there. So instead of in the past having to buy licenses to meet the capacity of all three, they're now able to get a pool that's more economical and suits their use case. And so the other two things here, dynamic workload shift and ease of use. Okay, and so with that, I'll hand over to my colleague Tertius.
Hello everybody, it's Tertius here. Yeah, like Mark and the guys said, we obviously want to make this worthwhile for you guys. I want to talk to you guys about our hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, data plane and control plane, let's say features that we're busy working on, and how we are looking to improving the way the guys do business every day. As a start off, let me just move the slide up to the next one. So, as you can see at the moment, we have our MAS service, either on-prem or in the cloud, and hopefully most of you guys know how MAS works. Just for you who may be not aware, MAS is our management and analytics system. It allows us to do centralized orchestration of all of our ADCs. That means we can literally monitor and manage all of our ADCs all over the world. So if you have an environment with multiple Netscaler application delivery controllers, let's say you have a few in AWS, a few in Google Cloud, a few in Azure, and a few on-prem. With using MAS, you are able to have a holistic view of all the actual ADCs out there with regards to their resource utilization, which applications you are running, the application health of the apps in those environments. Because the ADCs actually form, you know, the heart of your application, we are able to send data from those apps or from those ADCs into MAS and then give you the single pane of glass of front to back traffic. So we can see user coming in, which URLs he's accessing, which applications, the performance of each URL, his quality of experience, and everything else. That's all done via MAS. As part of that, if you think about, if we take one step back, at the moment we have an IT admin user who manages this new MAS environment, right? And he can now have access to all of his ADCs, change things on the fly, do analytics for you guys, etc. But he becomes the bottleneck at the end of the day, where he's the only person or the team looking after MAS, the only guys who can go and make changes. And we've seen a massive shift in the industry where clients are moving towards using or allowing more application owners to make changes to the ADCs than the actual IT admin person. It used to be networking guys, then firewalling guys, and now these days it's the app owners who want to make on-the-fly changes to keep the guys flexible and relevant, right? To be ahead of the game. Now, what happens is the IT admin guy becomes the bottleneck. So what we want to do is we want to change it so that the line of business users and the actual developers itself, they should be able to make changes within their environments and their applications. And we've changed and we have adapted MAS to allow for this using things like role-based access. We can allow certain line of business users or developers to access certain portions of MAS to go and manage those applications, to go and monitor them, to change, to customize, to analyze, etc. The only issue people normally have, if I go to the next slide, is those users, like the line of business guys and the dev guys, they have a certain skill set, right? So developers know APIs, they understand how to program, they now understand code. So they are a lot more smart than I am, for example. And they understand what they do. They don't necessarily have the skill set or the qualifications to go in admin and ADC, especially a Netscaler one. And you think about the life cycle of the actual application, they will need to go and deploy the application and configure it as well at the same time. They need to then add monitoring and analytics to their application. Now, the concepts of doing those things are simple, but to implement them on the ADC, you need a certain amount of skill set. And we have looked at these issues, and we are busy, let's say, finding new ways to solve these problems. A couple of these ones are instance provisioning, as well as app environment adapters. We'll go into a little bit more detail with that, with what that means. But we've also looked at disaggregated network functions and app graph designers. These are all, let's say, new ways of thinking that we've applied to our mass environment, which will allow those different owners of applications to self-manage their environments. One step further, these guys will have two environments. Let's say the dev guy. He will tend to go and update his dev environment, right? Now that's normally an easy environment with a single ADC, a few instances running the applications, and he would tend to deploy this to a development environment in a single availability zone within Azure, for example, AWS. He will have a single Netscaler appliance, a couple of servers, he will do load balancing, etc. So the concept again is easy. He still needs to deploy this. A different scenario is once they've tested all of these applications, they now need to move that to a production environment. And this changes the way we deploy things, because now we must start looking at different availability zones. How are we going to do HA, deploy multiple Netscaler appliances, maybe active using GSRB, or additional HA, multiple servers at the back, etc. And this becomes a little bit more tricky for the guys. If I can show you a demo, before I click here, this is actually our MAS GUI. Our MAS is a service in our cloud GUI. And what I'm going to show you guys is how we can very simply add a new instance in Azure or AWS in this example. So we actually create a profile connecting to Azure. Let me show you. My click button will start. So we can go and select AWS as an environment. We then create an access profile for that environment. So we actually authenticate against it. We tell the environment who we are. We give the MAS a whole bunch of access into that environment. It can then go and do stuff in your AWS. We then say what VPC it belongs to, in which region, and then give it a site name as well. Once we have this, our new site's configured, right? So now we go and provision the actual VPX into that MAS environment. We go and, if I can pause over here, you can see that we can actually change instance types, what AMI we want to use with an AWS, our cloud access profiles there. We can even select security groups. And this is all done with our first thought of integrating into different vendors and different environments. So we go and actually collect all the information from AWS. We then understand within MAS what security groups we have as an example. And I can very easily match my virtual appliance to those security groups and where it should fall into. So even for a developer who does not necessarily understand the inside out of an ADC, he will understand these concepts. And he'll be able to use this to go and deploy a VPX in those environments. Continue with the video. And now I have my instance, and in a few moments, it will be spun up within AWS. And that's how easy it is to set this up. It will then also be, as you can see, assigned to talk back to our MAS environment. So from here, we can see it's up. We can start monitoring this virtual appliance. And we can then start using things like our templates to deploy applications. We have a next video. If I can go to the next slide. So let's say we now have this AWS environment set up, like I've showed you guys, and we have an instance deployed, and we've used our templates to deploy applications within those environments. We can, with an AWS as an example, we can go one step further and say, I want to be able to allow my VPXs or my virtual ADCs to expand and to adapt to my requirements of my applications on the fly without changing anything manually. And this is exactly what we do over here. So we create an auto-scale group. Auto-scale group says my site's AWS California, my availability zones is US West. I then choose what addition I want to apply, 100 megs. We then have a few thresholds we can go and configure. CPU usage, memory, throughput. We go and choose CPU in this instance, but you can customize anything. Again, we can choose what security groups these VPXs fall into. But what happens is we have now set up a group of ADCs, and we're going to configure them and push them into AWS. And I want to use a style book or template to say that My Super Bowl template is already set up. So I know that I've got a load balancing virtual server. It's on port 80. It uses HTTP, for example. These are all my IP addresses in my pool. And now I have 4 instances available that can scale on demand. And in the next segment, we'll show you guys where as soon as I start sending traffic through these instances, you'll see it picks up on a certain CPU usage level, right? Now I'll start pushing traffic through, and we'll monitor this traffic, and we'll see, right, at the moment it's still within my threshold environment. That is fine. I have a single VPX serving my backend environments. What's going to happen is if I increase my actual CPU utilization due to requirements of the application or whatever else, I should immediately pick it up and then auto-provision another instance, which is what you can see over there. So by itself, we've auto-scaled up to cater for the extra requirements we have. Now, this is done with no manual intervention whatsoever. It's all done dynamically based on the thresholds that you've configured. I think that that's really amazing if you think about how we can change the way we manage applications and the need for more application throughput, whilst we're saving on our licenses we buy from Citrix. So, let me go to the next one. So now we have those two first, let's say, environments set. The next concept we're busy working on, and again, this is not done yet. We're still busy working on this, but the ideas are there. We want to allow developers specifically, or application owners, to use things like containerization, and to use things like Docker and Kubernetes and all these other platforms we have to develop apps in a lot more flexible way, dynamic way, when it comes to development and deployment of those apps. So I'm no Docker expert, I'm a containerization expert, but I do know this. An application looks roughly like the diagram you see on the screen, where we have an application that consists of a whole bunch of functions within the application, a whole bunch of things, apps you call, calls you make to different application levels. And what we want to do is we want to put some logic behind these. So if you had to match these up into, let's call it our old functions, which we've now changed to network functions or components, we say that if a user comes in and goes into the session manager, I would like to do some DNS. I would like to do some app firewall, seeing as an external user coming into my entry point into my application, right? I also want to monitor this traffic going in and outbound. The session manager then makes an internal call to accounts or to the database to go and log something. We need to be able to monitor at least all those traffic, or be able to do load balancing or DNS or content switching for all those application calls. And that's what we've now done with our new networking function concept. We've taken a feature set that we have on the ADCs, and we've just changed it to a networking function that's easier to understand. If you look at the next slide, as soon as it loads, here you can see an example of what I'm talking about. So within our ADC, for those of you guys who know the menu very well, we have load balancing, content switching, WAF, compression and caching, all those features that you go and then go and enable and go and customize and tweak and set up. We've taken those and created network functions. It's the same thing, it's just a network function. So if you think about traffic flowing through an application, we can apply these functions in each hop to make it work better, to be more reliable, to be more secure. We've actually built a demo as well, or just not a demo, an example, which I was talking about. We went to our dev guys in India and we said, listen guys, give us an application that's easy enough to understand, but can show us what we talk about when we talk about containerization and network functions within those containers. They went and found an application called Piggymetric. They say it's simple. I'm no developer, so it's complex to me, but it's a very simple application in theory. And the whole idea is a client connects into an API, he does a call, he logs in, he can access a whole bunch of services, right? So we've taken this application and we've created this app graph in our MAS. Now, again, this is still being developed on our side, but this is where we're going with the way we're thinking about applications and the ease of application use and deployment. We are able to take the application and create an app graph. Then we are able to drag and drop certain functions that we have, like load balancing, content switching, GSRB, gateway, etc., into the application. And now even a developer has a logical view of how traffic flows north, south, east, west within the applications. They are able to add functions on the fly, and they are then able to take this app graph and deploy these applications from MAS into any cloud environment where they have Kubernetes running or Docker running. That's how powerful our MAS is becoming. Our MAS literally is now becoming the next level of analytics and management engine, where we can manage and deploy applications on the fly very, very easily. And that's it from myself. So, as a next step, I hope you guys have found this useful. We really want to do a Q&A session as well, or section. So if I can ask you guys, type any questions you may have, any feedback you may have into the columns, we'll be able to see them and then ask some questions or answer these questions at least. Let's see what we have coming up. Just bear with us a few seconds, guys. We're just getting the questions going. Hopefully there's a lot of them coming through from you guys. Or we've made it clear enough that there's no questions. I see one question coming here. Will the Springboks beat the All Blacks again next week? I think the answer is yes. I'm a South African. I think that's quite clear. Thank you for the fantastic question. Anything else? I see we have a question here around the Kubernetes and Docker support for the new app graphs. If it's supported yet, the answer is no. We don't have any insight, unfortunately, into when it will be supported. We do know it's coming soon, and as soon as we do have any feedback, we'll let you guys know. Mark, I see there's a question for you. With pooled capacity, are we available to buy a pooled capacity license now, and how does it work?
Yes, you are. So if you're interested in pooled capacity, just reach out to your account manager or email us, myself or Tertius. You should get our contact through May from the webinar, and we can arrange a discussion about it.
So the option of pooled capacity, Mark, it's I think 20 instances as a minimum, as well as 10 gigs. What's our throughput?
I think that's right, but yeah, I would need to double check that.
Yeah. So I think we have 20 instances at the moment as a minimum, 10 gigs throughput at the moment, and then we can increment with 1 gig increments. So we're able to share the bandwidth and the instances across a whole bunch of ADCs depending on your requirements. Yeah. Any other questions? If that's everything, I don't see anything else. Okay, guys, if that's everything for now, I want to say really big thank you from our side for attending. We really appreciate it. As a reminder, you will see a survey for your completion once you leave today's webinar. You should have it in your mailbox tomorrow. It'll be a follow-up mail with a recording of today's session, as well as a feedback session or feedback form. If you guys don't mind completing that for us, that'll be fantastic. I think that's it from our side. No more questions, Mark? I
think that's it.
Nope.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.